My husband is a military man. We got married during his 2 weeks of leave before tech school and his deployment to South Korea. We had a short engagement, but I made the most out of our forced separation and did all the wedding planning in a matter of 3 months. It was a nice outdoor ceremony in the spring, at a park we had spent a lot of time at when we were dating. A pair of sandhill cranes showed up for the ceremony. It was quite lovely. The reception was a fun little affair, and before I knew it, we were all to our pre-honeymoon hotel. We were putting off an actual honeymoon until after his deployment. I would, after all, have a full year to plan it out. The motel had been provided by his stepsister. She worked for the chain and had gotten us quite a discount. I was less than impressed when we arrived, however, as it was directly next to a pretty scummy strip joint on a county highway. The elevator to the room had mysterious puddles on the scuffed laminate tile, and the railing on the second floor outdoor hallway was bent, probably from too many drunken bodies stumbling against it. The door and window faced the strip club. The neon lights stretched fully around the top of the neighboring building, and it cast a red glow through the curtains. There was a very large mirror taking up the wall across from the window, with the bed sandwiched between. Nothing would kill my post-wedding glow. I was ecstatic to be alone with my husband. The night passed as you'd expect, and in the morning, my husband had to go to work at his recruiter's office. That work is what gave him 2 weeks of leave instead of only a few days, so it was a necessary evil. I whiled away the morning, running the TV in the background, as I opened cards and counted monetary gifts from all our friends and relatives. I squirreled it away in a little zippered pouch, an unused makeup bag in case I needed to touch up at the reception. Sometime in the early afternoon, the hotel phone rang. I hadn't thought to tell any of our friends or family exactly where we were staying, as my husband had arranged for the room with his stepsister, so I was a little surprised. I thought perhaps someone who was unable to attend and didn't have my cell number had called the lobby looking for us, to give us their well wishes. I picked up the dingy yellow phone out of its cradle. Hello?
Hey, baby.
An unfamiliar male voice filtered through the static.
What are you doing all alone today?
I'm sorry, who is this? I answered, unsure if it was a joke.
I could come up there, and we could have a good time.
He crooned. I went to the window and closed the gap in the curtains, stretching the receiver cord over the bed as far as it would go. What? I couldn't be clever. I was too unnerved.
Yeah, baby. Let me up there, and I'll give you a free facial.
His tone had become rougher, less suave. No, sorry, I don't think...
Oh, come on, honey. We could have a good time together.
No thank you. Click. I quickly deadbolted the door, took the phone cable out of the wall, turned off the television, put our monetary gifts and my ring in the safe, unplugged the bedside lamp, and took it into the empty bathtub, where I spent the rest of the afternoon in total discomfort. I made my husband call my cell phone to prove it was him outside, before I let him in the room that evening. I never knew who the man was, or how he'd gotten the room phone number, nor how he knew I was alone. He didn't call again, and we were able to switch our reservation to another hotel in the chain. That one, thankfully, was not next to a strip club. Creepy, free facial guy? Let's not meet. Long ass time lurker, first time poster. So, this happened in summer of last year, but I thought you guys might appreciate hearing about it. Shortly after this incident, the camera I was using broke, but I managed to keep the memory card, so I'll be including a few pictures. Enjoy, and please, be wary of road trips in unfamiliar areas. Hubby and I were headed to Vegas for a second honeymoon. I got really sick on the first one, so we decided to give it another shot. From our home in Los Angeles, and on the way there, we kept seeing these signs advertising a 50s diner somewhere along the way. Peggy Sue's if I'm not mistaken, and we thought it sounded cute. However, we somehow missed the exit and promised each other we'd look for it on the way back. We proceeded to have a badass time in Vegas. I had just turned 21, and on the way back, fighting massive hangovers, we kept a lookout for the signs for the diner. We finally spotted one of the large signs on the side of the road, and it read Peggy Sue's 50s Diner, or something similar, but beside it, a sign read Next Exit. It looked different from the rest of the sign, but we were starving and excited that we actually found it, so we switched lanes and got off at the next exit. I honestly can't recall the name of the town we pulled into, but it certainly didn't look like it could safely contain a residence, let alone a 50s diner. The houses we saw looked completely abandoned, but there were cars parked outside and newspapers on the driveway. The windows were either boarded up or broken, and the lawns were either completely overgrown or barren. We drove past the rundown gas station, empty-looking buildings, and abandoned stores before we finally found the exit. Living in LA, we were used to being wary of shady areas, so we didn't slow down much the entire time, both of us on edge. We didn't see a single person the whole time. In retrospect, what we did next was pretty damn stupid. Captain Hindsight. But when we finally got out of that little place, almost immediately after re-entering the freeway, there were more Peggy Sue signs. We saw yet another one, with the same differently painted sign, claiming that the diner was at the next exit. Frustrated, and convinced some dumbass had put a sign in the wrong place, we pulled off, onto Calico Road. I remember the weirdest thing being the complete lack of life. There were no animals, or birds, or anything of the sort, and certainly no other cars or people to speak of. At this point, the sun was heading for the horizon, well on its way to disappearing. We kept looking for signs, but couldn't find any. We finally spotted what looked like a giant statue of a person, and kept driving. It turned out to be some huge lumberjack wooden thing, and if anyone who lives nearby would care to explain what the hell that thing is, feel free. Just standing by himself, in the middle of the desert road. We pulled up to see it had a sign that read, Calico Ghost Town, 3 miles, and nothing else. Now, this is probably the point where a normal, sane person would turn around and head back for the interstate. But my husband and I love creepy things, places, movies, you name it, so we were pretty stoked. Deciding we should check it out before it got too dark, we started to head towards it. It was several long miles, out into the empty desert road. I was looking around and taking pictures the entire time, and trying to Google the place on my phone. Of course, I couldn't get any signal whatsoever, but that wasn't unusual, as the entire drive through the desert offered very little connection. We were driving for a while, and the entire time, we didn't see any other cars in the long open roads. It felt like I could see a mile behind and a mile ahead of us. Finally, we saw a small white house and a large wooden gate or something. Past the house, with a sign indicating the location of the ghost town. Cheering, I lifted my camera to take a picture of the place. As soon as I did, the car, which I should mention by the way, is a giant 2010 Silverado borrowed for the trip from my sister-in-law, jolted violently. I had been about to take a picture, so I heard the camera click as I snapped another one on accident, as the car turned around, spinning into the road. I remember screaming and dropping the camera into my lap, while my husband, showing off one of the qualities that makes me love him to death, remained completely calm, controlling the truck perfectly as it slid into the sand. After what felt like forever, but was probably only a few seconds, we skidded to a stop. I was damn near hyperventilating, and after making sure I was okay, my husband got out to look at the truck. He called for me to come look, and I hurried around to his side to assess the damage. The tire was shredded, but it looked like something large had done it. Panicked, we hurried back to the road to make sure we hadn't hit anything. Sitting there, in a perfect little line, were several large rocks, lined up neatly on the side of the road, precisely where one's tire would be. The smallest was about the size of your fist, the largest easily tripling that. There were a couple of rocks scattered into the road, right over our truck's unmistakable tire tracks. Looking angry and scared at the same time, my husband kicked the rocks onto the side of the road, grunting angrily with each shove. That was enough for us. I stood there, just staring in shock. I remember thinking, why would somebody intentionally do that? The next thing I know, my husband was grabbing me by the arm and pulling me quickly back to the car, scanning the road and the gates ahead as he did. Again, looking back, I picked an awesome one, didn't I? He walked me to my side and then hopped back in his. Without giving a shit about the car's condition, he hit the gas, and we rimmed it the fuck out of there, noping it back towards the highway. I snapped a picture of the rocks as we drove away. I wanted proof. But as we started to leave, things got really weird. The whole spin out and inspection had taken literally less than a minute, and it had taken us about 10 minutes to get there because we were driving pretty slowly to avoid, ironically, rocks that may have fallen into the road. But sure enough, the moment we drove around the turn to get the fuck away from the ghost town, which, by the way, I still have never been back to or researched, should probably get on that. There was a car on the road. It was not 30 seconds down the road, a beat-up red pickup truck. When it got closer, we saw an older man inside. He had to be at least in his 60s, white, gray longish beard and a baseball cap. In the back seat were two very large dogs, one black, one a mix of browns. The man was watching us the entire time we got close, and I began to get uncomfortable. Of course, my husband, being the kind person he is, began to flag the man down and called out to warn him about the rocks. It wasn't just that though. We both wanted to get a good look at this guy and make sure that he knew it. The entire time, my husband's body was tense, and I can tell he was just itching to hit the gas. The conversation wasn't significant. Something along the lines of, "Hey, watch out. There are some rocks in the road ahead."
Oh, really? Where?
Front gates of the town.
Alright, thanks. I'll be careful.
It maybe took 10 seconds. With a nod, my husband continued to drive, and I looked in the rearview mirror. I made eye contact with the man, who was doing the same thing. I shivered and urged my husband to go faster, trying to find signal on my phone the entire time. I leaned out the window and snapped a picture of the tire. I have no idea why I kept taking pictures. I think it was keeping me calm and occupied at the same time. I began to scroll through the photos I had taken, curious to see what the one I had taken when we spun out looked like. As you can see, it wasn't anything particularly interesting. However, and neither myself or my husband are in any way religious, nor do we think this was anything but a coincidence. But when I looked at it, it was, of course, picture number 666, saved to that memory card. We finally got to the side of the freeway, and both of us finally began to relax. We began to change the spare, which is a pain in the ass, by the way. I don't know how you truck owners do it. Noting the hundreds of dollars worth of damage to the rim and other parts my husband was frantically naming. However, as we finally got into the car and the sun disappeared behind the horizon, we both completely agreed that getting the fuck out of that place, no matter what the damage to the truck was worth whatever would have happened had our suspicions about the man had been correct. We're going back to Vegas next month, and we plan to make an extra stop along the way.
Okay. I don't think you guys are even going to believe this story, but it's 100% true. Just happened last week. I don't know how else I could even preface this dumpster fire of a story, but here it goes. I'm a 22-year-old male and I live with my fiancée. We had a nice apartment, but we were really looking to buy a house. I know, a little young for that, but we both landed really nice jobs after college and Figured that it's better to get it out of the way now and start settling down. We're kind of old-fashioned like that. My fiance's grandmother owns a home and no one lives in it. She had it for about a year since a family relative passed away. No one wanted anything to do with it since there was a lot of work that needed to be done, like painting the walls and redoing the floors and just various tasks like that. It wasn't completely horrible inside, but there was enough work that it literally sat there for a good little while. Well, my fiancé and I started talking to her grandmother after buying the place. She told us that she would sell it to us for a low enough price that we would be able to afford all of the renovations and whatnot. We were really excited about it. It was really exciting to think we were going to have purchased our first home together so shortly after graduating from college. But here was the problem. She had a lot of people in her family who started feeling left out. It was my fiancé's aunt and her 2 sons. Their father had died shortly after the second son was born, and the mother had a hard time coping with everything. She was a regular drinker and arguably an alcoholic. My fiancé told me that they were extremely negative people, and after meeting them a few times at family functions, I was surprised at how right she was. They lived in government housing. She collected disability fraudulently, and her 2 sons didn't work, despite one being 24 and the other being 19. There were whispers of drug abuse in there too. Suffice to know that these were not the kind of people you wanted to associate with. When word got out that we were buying the house from her grandma, they started feeling really left out. There were a few occasions where they'd try offering to watch the house, very obviously an attempt to get in there and do God only knows what. We politely declined and did everything we could to avoid them. I happened to be at the house one day. My fiancé was working and I work remotely online, so I was home alone. I had just walked down the street to buy a lemonade when I saw someone at her house. It was extremely unexpected. I got ready to confront a potential burglar when I noticed it was my fiancé's cousin trying to break in. He was startled when he saw me and froze for a minute. I asked him what he was doing, and he told me something about thinking he saw a car he didn't recognize in the driveway. I explained that it was my car, and he left without any big confrontation. As he walked away, though, I heard him start cursing under his breath. This was the point when I started feeling like we had something to worry about. Not feeling safe inside your own home is the worst feeling ever, especially being 2 young recent college graduates. We both worked really hard to make this happen, and the idea that it made us feel unsafe there really bothered us. I still didn't even understand what they wanted out of the whole ordeal. They didn't have enough money to afford the property tax alone. Forget about utilities and anything else. About 2 weeks went by without any kind of confrontation. I had falsely convinced myself that they'd finally leave us alone. I was dead wrong. We went to McDonald's one day, exactly 1 week ago today, the day I'm writing this. Me and my fiancé both just wanted to be out of the house for a little while. Considering we were in the process of buying a house, we didn't want to go eat anywhere expensive, so McDonald's just seemed like a logical decision. Now, before I continue, I feel the need to explain something about my fiancé and I. We are normally very serious people. We work very hard and we're both kind of workaholics, but when we get together to have some fun, we go hard. Work hard, play hard, right? Well, we got kind of silly when we played. Let me cut to the chase. We were both playing in the ball pit at our local McDonald's. We always enjoyed goofing off like that, and we weren't too concerned with what people would think of us. We'd only been messing around for 5 minutes when her cousin showed up at McDonald's too. It was creepy. He walked right in, looked at us the entire time. Before he even opened the front door, his eyes were stuck on us, and they felt heavy. My fiancé immediately knew something was wrong when my facial expression changed and she darted around to see what I was looking at. We both watched as her cousin made his way out to the ball pit. He stepped outside. As he walked, he moved his body to grab something out of his pocket. I couldn't see what it was, but my first thought was a gun or a knife. The look in his eyes told me he was out to do serious harm. He jumped into the ball pit in my direction. I luckily landed one solid punch in his face as he came down. It threw him off. I had an advantage. He kicked me in the stomach, but I landed a few more punches on his face. He started screaming for me to stop and that I was killing him. I would have kept going if my fiancée hadn't been watching. He started this, not me. We got out of the ball pit. He then began telling us that he was going to press charges on me for assaulting him. I wasn't even fazed by this. There were plenty of witnesses there that had seen the whole thing transpire. I started telling him that I was calling the cops and I was going to press charges on him. He got really panicked and ran back to his car and drove off. I'm not going to lie to you. This whole thing really shook me up. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. I looked around online and found an easy solution: a restraining order. My fiancée and I had both gotten restraining orders on her aunt and her 2 cousins. I didn't know why we didn't think of this sooner. It really solved the issue, and once they understood that we had a restraining order against them, they buggered right off. I haven't seen or heard from them since. And thankfully, and hopefully, that's the end of my story.